Hello and welcome to MEE Live. This is our brand new live news show, broadcasting twice a week. Join us as we take another look at the stories shaping our world.
We are broadcasting live to YouTube from Middle East Eye's headquarters here in London.
I'm Mohammed Hassan.
And I'm Matilda Mallinson. Today is Thursday, the 3rd of April.
We have a stacked show tonight, don't we?
We do.
What's happening?
So we'll start with the deep dive, which is our sort of expert breakdown of a major world news story. Today we'll be looking at Hungary and its controversial departure from the International Criminal Court. What does that mean for international law? What does that mean for Netanyahu? And what does that mean for Palestinians seeking justice?
And on the spotlight today, I caught up with Mamadou Tal, who is a Cornell University student who got a lot of attention for being sort of at the forefront and the center of Trump's crackdown on pro-Palestine activists. He tried to sue the government, failed, and then he had to flee the country before ICE agents came to his house to detain him.
Wow, terrifying.
Yeah. But first, let's take a look at the headlines. Well, global markets are in disarray today following an announcement by Donald Trump that he's imposing tariffs on all countries. In a surprise speech made yesterday, the US president said all countries must now pay at least a 10% export tax on goods sold in the United States, with some countries being billed as high as 80%. Trump claims the new tariffs are calculated based on each country's reciprocal tariff that they apply on US goods. But the numbers actually don't stack up. In fact, it appears to be more based around the trade deficits of each country. For example, Jordan, a country with a free trade agreement with the United States, will now be charged a 20% tariff, whereas Syria, who is still facing trade sanctions by the United States, is now being slapped with 40%. Under the Trump administration, tariffs have become a key trade and foreign policy, part of the president's America First campaign to retain manufacturing jobs in U.S. cities.
Wealthy again. My fellow Americans, this is Liberation Day, waiting for a long time. April 2nd, 2025 will forever be remembered as the day American industry was reborn, the day America's destiny was reclaimed, and the day that we began to make America wealthy again.
But economists say the measures will not have the intended effect and will instead lead to record high inflation as manufacturers and exporters adjust their prices to account for the added levy. European Commission Chief Ursula von der Leyen said the new tax imports would cause dire consequences for millions of people around the globe.
Israel stepped up airstrikes on Syria overnight, carrying out 11 attacks in the capital Damascus and the central province of Hama. Israel has declared the attacks a warning to Syria's new transitional government. They say it suspects Syria's new Islamist rulers of working with Turkey to turn the country into a Turkish protectorate. And Israel says they see this as a rising threat on its border. It comes as Israeli airstrikes kill nearly 100 Palestinians in Gaza in 24 hours and adds to a growing list of regional attacks. On Tuesday, 4 people in Beirut, for example, were killed by Israeli airstrikes that have tested the fragile truce with Hezbollah.
Now, a new report into the deaths of media workers in conflict zones says more journalists have been killed in Gaza than any other war in modern history. The Watson Institute for International and Public Affairs says at least 208 Palestinian journalists have been killed in Gaza since the 7th of October 2023, mostly by Israeli airstrikes. In fact, the report says that number is higher than the combined total of all journalists killed in both world wars the US Civil War, the Korean War, the Vietnam War, and the wars in Yugoslavia and Afghanistan. Last week, Mohammed Mansour, a correspondent for Palestine Today, and Hossam Shabat, a journalist for Al Jazeera Mubashir, were killed by Israel in two separate attacks. Since October 7, Israel has denied international journalists entry into Gaza, with the exception of limited tours, during which reporters had to be embedded with Israeli forces and approve interviews and footage with commanders before publishing. Now stay with us as we turn to Hungary's groundbreaking departure from the International Criminal Court.
This is MEE Live's Deep Dive, where we pick apart a story that's shaking up the world. And today, that takes us to Hungary, which has just become the first EU state to outright reject the founding treaty of the International Criminal Court. Why? All for Netanyahu. On Thursday morning, Hungary announced plans to withdraw from the International Criminal Court, or ICC, hours after Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu arrived for a 4-day state visit. Netanyahu is subject to an ICC arrest warrant, charged with war crimes including starvation as a method of warfare, and crimes against humanity, including murder and persecution. Hungary has been a signatory of the ICC since the court was founded more than 2 decades ago, meaning it has a fundamental duty to arrest any wanted defendants who set foot in its jurisdiction. Yet, hours after the ICC announced Netanyahu's warrant in November, Hungary's Prime Minister Viktor Orbán made it clear he intended to defy the court. Orbán told reporters the ruling would, quote, have no effect in Hungary, and dismissed the ICC's decision as shameful and absurd. And he is not alone in dismissing the ICC's edict. Netanyahu's visit to Hungary is his second international trip since the ICC called for his arrest. In February, the accused war criminal received a standing ovation in the US Congress. So how have stakeholders responded to Orbán's announcement? Well, Israel's foreign minister, Gideon Saar, welcomed it, unsurprisingly, posting on X that the, quote, so-called International Criminal Court lost its moral authority in its zest for harming Israel's right to self-defense. Now, Amnesty International has called on other ICC member states to respond to prevent, quote, further instances of non-cooperation from countries who may also want to avoid arresting others facing warrants, for example, Vladimir Putin as well as Netanyahu. Belgium's Minister for Foreign Affairs, Maxime Prévost, has responded. He called Hungary's decision deeply regrettable and a significant setback for the fight against impunity for the most serious crimes, among which he included genocide. However, the majority of ICC state leaders are yet to respond, leaving a lingering silence. Meanwhile, within Hungary, criticism itself is reportedly sparse as well. Earlier, I spoke to Anita Zsurzan, a scholar of fascism based in Budapest, and she said that even civil rights activists and liberal politicians are either remaining silent or being silenced, making Hungary a safe place for war criminals. Here's what she said.
The main issue with his arrival is that there is no resistance by Hungarian officials or activists or anyone else who would otherwise defend the rule of law or international principles in Hungary. So there is a complete silence by our politicians and our media, and also by civil rights activists who would otherwise rally for Ukraine and protested previously when Putin was visiting the country. So it's kind of like a total blackout. And also the liberal mayor of Budapest, Gerger Karácsony, who has participated in various demonstrations for Ukraine and cited that he believes in the principle of never again that applies to Ukraine, has also decided to be silent. to summarize it, there is no real resistance, there is no real criticism. It's just like total compliance, and many people tend to joke about Hungary being constantly on the wrong side of history. That's like a running joke in Hungary at this point, but it's absolutely true. So this is not our first ride on the rodeo regarding supporting genocide, because this was the case also with the Serbian genocide in Bosnia, and also, of course, with the Holocaust. So it's not really a novel situation. And unfortunately, as Orbán claimed in his posts across social media, that Hungary is safe for Netanyahu, which is true, because Hungary is a safe space for war criminals in general. Orbán had also made it clear that he would not arrest Putin either, and I think this is true to basically any war criminal we could think of. So yeah, Hungary is a safe haven for war criminals.
So what does Hungary's departure mean for the International Criminal Court and for international law in general? And what does it mean for any prospect of legal consequences for Netanyahu and his government's actions in Palestine? Here to enlighten us is Tayyab Ali, Director of the International Center of Justice for Palestinians, or ICPJ. Welcome to MEE Live, Tayyab.
Thank you very much for having me.
Our first question is how great a threat does this news pose to international law and indeed to any chance of justice for victims of Netanyahu's warfare?
I mean, the first thing to consider is what this means for Hungary and where it puts Hungary in terms of its history journey through history. But there's no doubt in saying that Hungary's withdrawal from the ICC is without a doubt a serious blow to international law. It definitely undermines a court designed to hold even the most powerful individuals accountable. For victims of war crimes like those in Gaza, this move sends a clear message. If Hungary and some countries in the world will always be prepared to protect suspected war criminals, to shield suspected war criminals from justice. And it's important to also put this in its context. Just because Hungary has decided to take this step is probably more likely to damage its own reputation and itself. It certainly will not prevent accountability processes across the world. The framework for international law and accountability is broader than just one court, and Hungary's attempt to sabotage accountability, I think, won't succeed in the long term.
I suppose, though, there's a risk that other countries might follow Hungary's example, if not just departing from the ICC, just generally, rolling out invitations and undermining this arrest warrant. Germany, for example, comes to my mind, given that the incoming Chancellor Friedrich Merz has already invited Netanyahu. Is this a risk?
Yeah, it's without a doubt a risk that other countries will follow Hungary's example. And in a way, it's an important example for countries to face at the moment. What do they stand for? Do they stand on the side of victims, or do they bow to political pressure? I mean, Hungary may have taken the first step, but the world is definitely watching to see who follows and who holds the line. But something that lawyers like myself have known for a very long time is that the international international legal framework has often been used by Western states to promote and push their foreign policy objectives and target countries in the global south and in particular in Africa. And so what we're seeing in reality at the moment is the truth coming out for the first time in decades, where we're seeing people and states, whether or not they actually understand principles of justice and will protect the rule of law, or well, in actual fact, when the rule of law comes to face them, they will turn away from it. And Hungary is the first example of that. Now, we'll see what Germany does. It wouldn't be a surprise to me if Germany decided to take that same suit, but that will instruct other countries across the world that they will have to step up. And I think we'll see that happening, as we saw happen with South Africa at the ICJ with their triggering of the Genocide Convention against Israel.
That's interesting. I wonder if we will see it. I hope we would see it. But if the spotlight is now on other ICC state leaders, who may wish to protect the court's jurisdiction, how will or how should these leaders react? As it stands, we haven't seen much said by Keir Starmer, for example.
Yeah, I mean, you're right. This is definitely a moment for moral leadership. And leaders like our own Prime Minister Keir Starmer, who claim to uphold the rule of law, who in fact are experts in international law. He himself is a barrister who practiced as a human rights barrister in the United Kingdom and across the world, in fact, actually litigated in court on issues such as genocide. Well, it's time for these leaders to step up. Did they mean it when they stood for the rule of law and justice? Did they mean it when they advocated these principles in their private practice? And as prime ministers, are they going to abandon this? The silence and ambiguity will only embolden states like Hungary to continue to dismantle international norms. The UK must, it's imperative that the UK reaffirms that no one is above the law, not even close allies such as Israel. Anything less would be a betrayal of the principles of the ICC.
We'll have to wait and see if Starmer and other ICC state leaders do speak out. Turning to Hungary itself now, we heard from an activist inside Hungary today that criticism of this ruling has been silenced or silent, but Orban's regime has faced continual protests and is facing protests at the moment due to previous and ongoing crackdowns on free speech, judicial independence, minority rights, as well as its perceived alignment with Russian President Vladimir Putin, who also faces an ICC arrest warrant. What does Hungary's departure from the ICC say about rights and freedoms within the country?
Well, what's interesting is since Prime Minister Netanyahu, or suspected war criminal Netanyahu, announced that he was traveling this week to Hungary, we did speak with, as part of the work that we do at ICGP, with a number of activists and lawyers and very senior lawyers, in fact, in Hungary. And we had the same response. People are very angry, in fact, or some people are very angry about the stance that Hungary's government has taken with regards to protecting people like Netanyahu, but they're frightened to speak out. In fact, we were working with lawyers in Hungary on a legal case at the moment with regards to Netanyahu, and later on today we'll be sending a letter to the Hungarian authorities with regards to their obligations within the ICC. Even though they've announced that they've left the ICC, they still have obligations which attach in law, and actually domestic Hungarian law, to the Hungarian authorities, which basically mean that they should arrest and surrender Netanyahu to the ICC. But these individuals were very frightened to let it be known that they had these views and they had these feelings and they wanted to protect the rule of law, and they didn't want to protect a suspected war criminal within their jurisdiction. And that's really worrying. And so whether it's silencing journalists, targeting minorities, or now withdrawing from the ICC, these are all steps in a broader effort to insulate the Hungarian regime from accountability. It tells us that Hungary is not just turning away from international norms, it's actually turning away from democracy itself.
Wow. And to the ICC itself now. Now, when the ICC issued arrest warrants for Netanyahu and Gallant, many European and US political figures condemned the court and accused it of bias. But interestingly, Netanyahu and Gallant are the first Western-aligned leaders to have ever faced ICC arrest warrants, and over 90% of defendants come from Africa and Asia. I wonder, what does the defiance of European and US leaders tell us about the global balance of justice?
Well, it tells us that when you get a person into a courtroom, when you manage to litigate, there is a risk to the aggressor, to the oppressor, that the rule of law and justice will be done. If that wasn't the case, then those people that shield war criminals, those people that participate in war crimes, those people that are complicit in them wouldn't be so frightened and wouldn't attack so aggressively institutions like the ICC or the ICJ, and they wouldn't try so hard to prevent people like Benjamin Netanyahu going before them. I mean, if Viktor Orban and the Hungarian authorities and Trump himself think that there is no issue for Netanyahu, then why not surrender to the ICC? Why not have a trial? Why not let independent judges adjudicate on that issue? And the truth is that they will not put themselves in that position because they fear that justice will be done. The truth will be seen, the truth will be told, and people will be prosecuted and convicted. And so you can see by the actions that, for example, the United States have taken on the ICC by issuing sanctions, by attacking the institution, by attacking its officers, that clearly there is a fear of this. But the process in terms of accountability is wider than the ICC. And at the ICJP, we're working very much within the international framework with countries across the globe in order to make sure that attacks on individual institutions, be it the United Nations, be it UNRWA, be it the ICJ, effectively fall away and become meaningless. There's a lot more work to be done, but I think accountability is on its way.
Well, speaking of accountability and of your work at ICPJ, maybe you can tell people what routes remain for Palestinians in particular who may hope to see justice for these alleged war crimes and crimes against humanity. I'm aware that the ICPJ, for example, recently launched an initiative to, secure exactly this goal. Please take the chance to tell us a bit about Global 195.
Sure, I'm grateful for that. And so at ICJP, we launched something called the Justice for Gaza campaign at the beginning in October 23, and that was collating evidence. Now, we've got to a position now where we've collected a vast library of primary, credible, criminal law level or criminal standard evidence, which tells a narrative about really serious, horrific war crimes and crimes against humanity perpetrated against the Palestinian people by Israel. And as the second part of the Justice for Gaza project, we launched, as you say, the Global 195 initiative. And this is to safeguard for precisely the type of thing that Hungary has done. We couldn't take the risk that one single institution, the ICC, would be the institution that would resolve the problem. Of course it should, and of course the ICC prosecutors issued arrest warrants, and if people live up to their obligations at the ICC, justice will be done. But we can't take the risk to rely on that. And so we've developed a global network of lawyers, and the ambition is to have a legal team in all 195 countries in the world, yes, and including Israel, and have those legal teams prepare complaints and provide them to local law enforcement agencies based on the evidence that we've collected. But not only that, where the local law enforcement agency is not prepared to act responsibly and initiate accountability processes or prosecutions, then individual legal teams in each of those states will apply for private arrest warrants where possible in each of those jurisdictions and seek private prosecutions of suspected Israeli war criminals and those that are complicit in that activity.
Amazing work. And I apologize, I believe I said ICPJ. It is, of course, ICJP. And anyone who wants to learn more about this initiative, you can visit icjpalestine.com and keep up to date with developments at middleeasti.net. Tayyab Ali, thank you for joining us.
Thank you very much.
Next up, we speak to Mamadou Tal, a former Cornell student currently in hiding due to the Trump administration's crackdown on pro-Palestinian student voices.
The crackdown by the Trump administration on pro-Palestine activists has continued to intensify despite legal challenges. Undercover agents belonging to the Department of Immigration and Customs Enforcement, or ICE for short, have been filmed arresting university students on campuses, in their homes, and even in the middle of the street. It began with the arrest of Columbia graduate Mahmoud Khalil, a Palestinian student who became one of the faces of Gaza encampments last year, and negotiated with the university on behalf of protesters calling on the administration to divest from Israeli companies. Despite being married to a US citizen and a green card holder, Khalil was sent to an immigration detention facility in Louisiana and told his residency was revoked and he would be deported. That deportation order was blocked by a judge, though the US government vowed to pursue the case in higher courts if necessary. Khalil's lawyers have successfully managed to bring Khalil back to New Jersey, where he was first held, hoping to allow his case to be heard in front of more sympathetic courts. You may have also seen the chilling video of Turkish graduate student Rumeysa Öztürk being apprehended by masked ICE officers. She was later transferred to Louisiana, where many others have also been taken. This footage has ignited a fiery debate in America about whether the right to free speech enshrined in the country's constitution extends to non-citizens, and whether immigration officers should be given sweeping powers to arrest and detain legal residents who haven't committed a crime. Speaking yesterday, Secretary of State Marco Rubio said last week that Apologies. Speaking in Jamaica last week, Secretary of State Marco Rubio said that at least 300 visas had been revoked by the Trump administration and that deportations would continue.
Told us, I'm going to America not just to study at your university, but to tear up your campus. We would have never let you in. And if you do that, once you come into the United States, we're going to kick you out. We're going to do that. And I don't care what terrorist organization is supporting, we're going to kick you out. If you're a gang member, we're going to kick you out. Okay? If you're one of these violent gang members that's coming to the United States, then we're going to kick you out. That we're going to do. There's no doubt about it. But the president's very committed to that. And but if you're a green card holder and you're not any of these things, you're going to be fine.
Some of those targeted as part of this nationwide sweep have attempted to appeal to the justice system. In Cornell University, a group of academics and students launched a legal case against the Trump administration. At the heart of that case was Mamadou Tall, a British Gambian PhD student whose home was then raided by ICE agents in an attempt to arrest him shortly before he could launch that case. After failing to get a judge to hear the case, Tal decided instead to leave the United States before he faced the same fate as Mahmoud Khalil and Rumaisa Ozturk. But as he told me earlier, his fight is not yet over. Thank you so much for your time. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you so much for having me on.
Now, before we begin, I want to ask you where in the world you are right now. Are you in a place where you can share that?
Not currently, not at the moment. I would prefer not to, but the most important thing is that I'm currently safe and I'm not in the United States.
That's good. So then my next question is, why did you decide to leave?
Yeah, thank you so much for the question. If I'm being honest with you, the decision to leave was very abrupt. It wasn't like some meticulously planned idea and days in the making. It was very much me and my legal team had a conversation, and then we kind of game planned next steps. And I think it became increasingly clear to me that even with a court order, my safety was not going to be guaranteed. And it did not mean just because the court would rule in my favor that I could now walk around New York City with my head held high and not have the fear of being abducted by or bundled into an unmarked vehicle and then transported thousands of miles away to Louisiana. And I think increasingly we had realized, well, myself included, that the longer we draw this out, the more likely my detention is, and the less likely I would have leverage to negotiate my release. All in all, it became very clear to me that it's kind of the longer I wait, I'm gambling more with my freedom. And I think I took a decision and said, you know what, I think I've made a political point I've made, and I'm ready to kind of just leave at this moment.
Because of course, this wasn't your first course of action. You and some of the other faculty members at Cornell attempted to take this case to the courts, to the legal route, to pressure the Trump administration into backing down. What was the moment when you decided that, okay, for me, I'm probably better off to leave? Was there a specific incident or event that happened that made you think that going through the court system wasn't necessarily going to protect you right in this moment?
I can't say one specific moment, but what I can say, there were instances where I was, for example, with Rumaisa, for example, even though the court ordered her not to be removed and the habeas, she's in Louisiana. Mahmoud as well, he's not in New Jersey. And increasingly, I don't know if I also saw as well, an administrative error took a Latin American person to El Salvador. This person has no affiliation with gangs. And I'm thinking increasingly, and then the government's briefing said that we cannot locate this person anymore, or we don't know how to bring them back. So I thought to myself, it's either El Salvador, Guantanamo Bay, or my freedom at this point. And I think it was, so it wasn't like one thing, but I think as I was seeing the flagrant disregard of the Trump administration to the courts, and we're in a time where we're seeing the president of the United States attack judges and the court legal system alongside Elon Musk on Twitter, on X. So I think given I was kept seeing the increasing lawlessness of the Trump administration, it was convincing me and pushing me towards the decision that I made quite last minute.
And of course, I assume that you, like the rest of us, were watching the footage that comes out. You know, you mentioned Rumeysa, the video of her getting detained on the side of the street by ICE agents, I think sent a chill down the spines of a lot of people watching it. And I'm sure you were looking at that and picturing yourself in that position. What were those moments, what those weeks in between finding out that these agents were coming, essentially trying to find you and making that decision to leave? What was your life like in that period of time?
Yeah, I haven't really spoke about this publicly, but it was, I was in captivity, right? I had not seen sunlight for like 2.5 weeks. I was in hiding, right? I was in a place that no one knew, or only extremely trusted people knew where I was. I was in Ithaca, but I was somewhere where no one knew where I was. No one could get to me either. It was, and again, just like at a practical level, an emotional level, I hear a loud bang and I'm thinking, okay, they're here to get me. I hear someone speaking too loudly and I'm thinking, my body starts thinking, they're here to get me. My sleep was terrible in those 2.5 weeks. My appetite, I lost my appetite in that time. It was really an intense period of time. It really was intense. It really was a moment of being so unsure what could happen at any moment that I had to start thinking about my safety in ways that I had never thought about it before. And, it really hit home the material consequence of what it means to be pro-Palestinian in the United States in this moment. And that was the beginning of my thought process. And I can say, this is not to kind of in any form take any credit or big myself up, but I would say up until my decision to leave, I can say hand on heart, I did not think about myself. It was very much I thought about the movement. I thought about others, international students. I thought about, obviously centering Palestine and Gaza, and I still do. But I think at the moment I took my decision to leave, or like in the run up to that decision, a few hours before, it started to become a different calculation of, okay, let me think about myself in this moment. And let me think about what does self-preservation in this moment look like. And then I took the decision to leave.
When you decided that you were going to take part in this legal challenge to the Trump administration, did you expect, or were you worried that this was going to put a bigger target on your back as a result?
In terms of a target, I think it's become clear, and the courts and the government has said this as well in their briefing. I was on their list. I mean, given my high-profile nature of my suspension in September of 2024, the New York Post talked about deporting students, and they only named me in the article. Beta, Canary Mission, so many others kept naming me. If almost every day on Twitter, on X, I was being tagged by some account. You're going to be next. So, for example, people would say, you're going to be deported when the executive orders were signed. After that, when Mahmoud was taken, I'd get tagged, you're going to be next, right? So I don't think, I think I was ready within people's minds, especially the Zionists' minds, about for deportation. What I can say is I did not anticipate the retaliatory measures the government took and the lies they told. The government said all of a sudden, oh, this is not retaliation. We're going to deport you the day before you filed your lawsuit. And I want to say the week of me filing the lawsuit, even before the hearing has been done, my visa is revoked. I'm told to surrender to ICE. I have ICE agents at my house. I got a tip off that FBI and DHS are looking for me. This is all before the hearing, right? All forms of intimidation, and this was retribution for filing the lawsuit. So yes, target was maybe I can say I accelerated the process, but it's clear they were going to come for me.
I want to read you something that the Secretary of State, Marco Rubio, said in response to this wave of arrests and detentions of students like yourself. He said, quote, "If you told us I'm going to America not just to study at your university, but to tear up your campus, we would have never let you in." Those are strong words, and I wonder, when you hear them, what do you make of a statement like that?
First and foremost, Marco Rubio, it would be good for him to remember how his own country, how his own family arrived in the United States fleeing the Batista regime in Cuba. I think he'll be good to remember that. And secondly, but more secondly also that I would say, yeah, I did intend to study and finish my PhD at Cornell University. I did not also anticipate a genocide to start. I did not anticipate that the United States would be more than just complicit, but facilitate and arm a genocide. If a condition of your visa is now contingent upon having no moral conscience, then the United States can keep their visas, and they have lost many students and will continue to lose the best people who come to the United States. So I think, I don't take these words seriously. I don't even believe he's acting on his own behalf. These people, we know the Israeli lobby is powerful in the United States, and they have these politicians in their back pockets. So I'm under like no false impression that Marco Rubio is even acting entirely or by himself.
There's this argument that is taking place across the United States right now about the First Amendment, the freedom of speech enshrined in the Constitution of the United States, and whether it applies or extends to people that are or were in your position, people on visas, people on green cards, or whether this is solely restricted for US citizens. And I know that when the encampments first started across campuses, such as Cornell's last year, there were a number of students that were supportive of the encampments, but had to decide whether or not they wanted to take part and risk their visas getting revoked or risk their scholarships getting taken off them. For you and for others like you, I'm sure you knew others that were in similar positions to you. How difficult was it to make that decision? Did you have a feeling that if I took part in these protests, then maybe at one point in time my own education might be at risk?
Two things. So the argument regarding the First Amendment is an important one. The First Amendment reads persons. It does not say citizens. And several lawyers, attorneys, judges, even at the level of the Supreme Court, has declared that it applies to non-citizens. If you are in the United States of America, you have First Amendment protections. That's the law. People can narrowly try to define it to exclude certain speech they don't like, and we already know there's a Palestine exception. But that's how the law is read. In terms of the encampment, again, it wasn't a difficult decision. I think my personal kind of choices and decisions were always led by what I was seeing in Gaza and the death and destruction. I had to do something. Whether my efforts were in vain, whatever the outcome, I had to do something. And with the Columbia crescendo moment of the encampment, we had to make sure that we cannot allow Gaza to become background noise. We must refuse genocide. Like I think the crime of all crimes, we cannot allow that to become normalized. And anything that was going to contribute to the ideological struggle, to the material struggle of divestment, to any form of contributing to the Palestinian liberation struggle, I had to be a part of that, and I wanted to be a part of that. So I think it wasn't very difficult to make a decision for me. I know people were scared, and rightfully so. If you're asking, did I connect the encampment to this moment now of me leaving the country so abruptly? Then no, of course, I didn't foresee that. But in that moment, I made the right decision of being involved, and I have no regrets.
Now, tertiary institutions, especially those in the United States, have a history of campus activism, campus protests. Were you shocked? Were you surprised by the way that administrations of universities like Cornell reacted to the encampments last year?
I would say I was disappointed but not shocked when it comes to university administrations. Because I think on one hand, these are the same universities that claim to honor academic freedom, intellectual inquiry, free speech. But when it comes to Palestine, that goes out the window, further reifying what we have come to understand to be the Palestine exception. And I also did not anticipate the universities engaging in that level of repression and collaboration. The universities essentially handed their students off to be slaughtered, like lamb to be slaughtered, all right? So I guess that's very disappointing. And I don't know if universities can recover in this time. I think damage has been done for a generation to these universities. And I think the only way they can come back is by refusing to capitulate to Zionism, by refusing to normalize genocide, and actually upholding what it means to be producing people of moral conscience. So I mean, I don't have a lot of faith in institutions because I think fundamentally they act as businesses more than academic institutions. But I think if they're going to be salvaged, then they have to change course immediately.
That was my interview with Mamadou Tal, Cornell University PhD student and activist. And you can watch that full interview with him right here on our YouTube page or listen to the Big Picture podcast wherever you get your podcasts. And speaking of Rumeysa Öztürk, Tufts University issued a statement this week demanding for her release from detention in Louisiana. And meanwhile, Jewish American students chained themselves to the gates of Columbia to protest the university's role in the detention of graduate Mahmoud Khalil.
That the university tell us the name of the trustee that handed over students' private information to ICE, resulting in his detainment.
Now, before we wrap, we want to tell you a little bit more about MEE Live, which we're launching here today. Matilda, you joined Middle East Eye with the explicit purpose of helping us set up this show, and here we are now. Tell us, what is this show and what can people expect from it?
So Middle East Eye's live stream is designed to showcase the breadth of Middle East Eye reporting, and that is not just about events in the Middle East, but how those events affect the rest of the world and how what's happening in the rest of the world shapes the Middle East. Now, there will be headlines, so the stories happening right now. We'll have deep dives where we have these expert breakdowns of some of the biggest stories. The spotlight, as we just saw with Mamadou Tal, will spotlight the experiences of people on the ground, and we will also occasionally have a viewpoint segment where we look at the topics dividing opinion and maybe bring you some of the opinions from those of us here at MEE, maybe you, Mohammed, maybe myself. So that'll be the sort of format of the show people can expect.
And we heard a number of really powerful voices throughout this show. What more basically can we expect from the guests that are going to be featuring here?
So yeah, there will obviously be a lot of you and me, but we will have a lot of Middle East Eye reporters, some of them here in the studio, some of them reporting from the scene. They are, of course, all over the world, and sources on the ground, experts, people experiencing the news, straight up lived experience, all sorts of sources. And today was just a small example.
And that's right. So the most important thing is that we want you to be a part of the show as well. You are watching these interviews. You are listening to the same stories that we are. So share with us your thoughts and opinions, whether that's in the live chat here as we are broadcasting live, or it's by sending us a message directly. And we'll tell you how to do that in just a second.
Maybe just tell audiences exactly when and where they can expect to see this live show on the regular.
Absolutely. So 5 p.m. British Standard Time if you are in the UK. If you're on the East Coast or if you're in New York, we'll be broadcasting at 12 noon every Tuesday and every Thursday, every single week, which means that 5 p.m. or 12 p.m. this time next week on Tuesday.
Exactly. And as Mohammed just said, we really want to hear your views. We will answer questions live. We will share some of your opinions if you message in. And you can contact us also anytime on any social media at Middle East Eye, or email meelive@middleeasteye.net.
And that, I believe, is all that we have time for today. So thank you for joining us. And make sure that you turn on your notifications so that you know next week on Tuesday when we go live.
We will see you then.